Welcome everybody. In this video we will cover first answering this question about adding Bale feed triggers to a map, and then I will go on to explain what we actually did and how you can apply it to other triggers. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is this is a gold mine. If you look at where your default game is installed, if you have Steam, it'll be something like this, and then Farming Simulator 17, data, and then we are looking for the map. So map 01 is Goldcrest Valley. Let's open up Goldcrest Valley. As this map loads, we will look at something important. You need to have the user attributes window open somewhere on your editor. I dock mine down there in the bottom left-hand corner. And if you do not have it open, you can open it by selecting Window User Attributes. But anyway, let's get on with how it looks in the default game. So the Bale trigger is right there on the bottom. You can see it is nested as a child underneath feeding cows inside. So this is a trough. The bale feed trigger is a child of that. And then you also have a feeding trough, and that also has a bale trigger over there in the back. So each of these troughs have bale triggers where you can use to feed them hay. And if you look at the parent, if you actually click on that, this is what holds some of the user attributes that are important to this specific trigger. If you look, it will say the Bale trigger index is number 4. This is where the game, when the engine runs, it is actually going to be looking at the 4th position for this cow bale trigger. Now, something important to remember is that they are 0 index. It starts with 0. So this is 0.0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the cow bale trigger is an index 4. Over here, this would be index number 6, starting with 0. So if we look at the feeding cows inside, it'll say Bale trigger index number 6. So if we export this, we look at exporting the Bale trigger export selection. If you export something with a material or texture attached to it, you would need to export with files. But right now, it doesn't really matter because it is just a trigger that doesn't have any files. So we will export it as Bale trigger. If you want to make it organized, you can work on that later. Right now, I'll just put it here under the maps folder, the same level as the map i3D. We will save. Now, if we go into our downloads where I have just unzipped Sandy Bay, I will look in maps, and then there you can see our Bale trigger that we exported from the default game. So let's open up the Sandy Bay map. And while we're doing that, we will look at Goldcrest, and we will actually, I was going to close that, but let's leave that open for now. We'll need that in a second. Now, if you look at Sandy Bay, what you do is you go to import and import that Bale trigger. And now that's just going to pop up down here, and it's going to pop up basically the same transform location that it was at before, which is right there. And as you can see, there are a few other things down there. It looks like his animated objects that he has running throughout the map. They're just hidden down there, and then they will take off and go throughout the map per the script. But anyway, we need to cut that object, Control X, and we will put it with, where did he put farm? Well, an easier way to do it is, oh, I guess we could just do it here. Animals, and then cows, and then gameplay, and tip triggers. So let's just look at the feeding trough. I'll highlight it and hit F to focus. And now this feeding trough, if we open it up, it actually already has a cow bale trigger. Okay, so in this case, we did not need to import it, but if you are editing a map that does not have a cow bale trigger, then this is what you would do. You would just Control V, and it would put that trigger there, and then you would just reposition it, and it looks like it's repositioned pretty well. Maybe I want to pull it forward, but then I would mark that position on the index like you saw on the Goldcrest map. So let's just delete that for now since we don't need it. This one already has a trigger. We'll make sure the trigger is in the right spot. We might want to move it forward just a smidgen. That looks good there. So now let's look at this because I bet you, yeah, so there is no index for the bail trigger. So the game, when it runs, even though this bail trigger exists, the engine does not know it exists because there is nothing on this trough saying, hey, look here for a bail trigger. So let's do that. If we look at the default map under feeding cow inside, the string that we want is bail trigger index, and it is 6. If you ever don't know, and this is something important, this will be a brief aside. If you don't know well, this is obviously a Boolean, this is a float, this is a string. It might look like an integer, but it is actually a string. If you ever don't know what variable type these user attributes are, all you have to do is go to the actual map. So let's open up in Goldcrest Valley. Let's open up this in the Notepad editor. So right there, you can see that I have done this beforehand. It opens up to bail trigger index. It is a string and it is 4. This is what we are looking for. We want to make sure that it is a string. I knew this, I'm just showing you how to do it. It is a string, so when you go down here to add it, you add a type string. If you ever don't know what variable type this is when you're adding it to a new map, that's how you figure it out. You don't have to add it inside Giant Setter. You can actually edit the map in Notepad++ and essentially just copy and paste this and then edit the value to whatever the index is. But you can do it either way. I'll just show you in Giants Editor because it is more visual. So let's go over here, and under feeding cows inside, we want to go to string, and then let's make sure we get that right. It is bail trigger index. So bail DX. All right, so then we will click add and it'll pop up right there. And this is index number 6. Let's just make sure it's the same on this map as it is on the basic giants. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is. So we have the game engine now understanding that look for a bail trigger at index number 6. If you want to do the same thing out there for the feeding trough, just add a string called bail trigger index and add. And then this was index number 4. So I don't know if you need to do this for pigs or cows, but we will save the Sandy Bay map and test it out in game. One quick note, if you go to check anything inside the basic Giants map, do not ever save anything in here, even if you didn't do anything. If the only thing you did was reposition the camera, never click save. Otherwise, you will not be able to play this with other players multiplayer because it basically thinks that it's a different map that someone else has. So now that we saved the Sandy Bay, we can, oh, maybe I didn't save Sandy Bay. I think I did. I think that was just me moving the camera. When you move the camera, it actually changes the attributes for the translation for the camera. So yeah, it registers that as you have done something. So we will exit out of those. And that covers the specifics for how to add a bail trigger to the animals. If you take those concepts of indexing and apply it to the rest of the animals, you can really get a good understanding of how the editor and the game engine work together to edit things on a map. For example, if you look at the cow's husbandry parent, you'll see dirt areas, for example, are 0, 0, 5. So that would be all the way down here, 0, 0, and then this is the 5 of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 dirt areas. So you could use this to, if you ever added anything, for example, if you wanted to add a new liquid manure tank, say you did not like this one out here, you wanted to add the the underground one that instead of the overall pit. You could do that, but then remember, whatever index you add that liquid manure tank to, when you first import an object to a transform group, it always appears at the bottom of the list. So that is going to be at a different location than what the game thinks it's at. Liquid manure trigger index, it thinks it's at 003. It is at 001, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can adjust that one of two ways. You can just go back up to wherever it was. I think it said 3, so that'd be 2 spots. Or you can go back and adjust every single one of these so that it is accurate for the children. You can do whichever's easier in your head. Something else to take note of is a little fun thing, the straw plane. If you ever wondered how it gets positioned, or if you notice it's a little bit off on a map, or you want to create your own straw plane texture and put it in there, the way that you adjust it is right there. If you look at min and max, that is the minimum and maximum values that that straw plane will go at based on the levels. So the minimum will be if you have no straw. So let's look at the straw plane index 004. So it is right there, 004. And if you notice, the Y translate is at 1,000 or 100.6. And if you remember, that was the minimum. So if you look at the maximum, let's control C that value and go to the straw plane. And let's put that in there. So this is what the straw plane will look like when it is completely full. So you can see, make sure there's no parts that are floating or, past, you know, to make sure it's not like that. I don't know, like that. That's what I'm trying to say. To make sure it's too far, not too far there, or too far in the air floating. You definitely don't want that. That would look awful weird. Something else to look at is if you've ever wondered how you can make a map with a manure heap area that appears on the inside, it's right here. So this is the start, the width, and then the height, which will be underneath us over there. So this is the area that manure will start heaping up when cows make manure. Instead, if you wanted it to appear out in the pit so you did not have to scrape it out, you could reposition those over to here. So you have a start, that is the width, and the height was right about there. So you could do something like that, and obviously you'd have to test this to make sure it's close enough to the edges without being outside. But that is how you adjust the manure pit area. So this is actually a problem I ran into on my map. If you screw this up and you have the indexes wrong, most likely the game will be trying to move something that is a static object and not supposed to move. For example, if you look over here under rigid body, it says that this liquid manure plane is a kinematic object. If you look at the tank on the hole, it is going to be a static object, right? This does not move in the game. If, for example, you make a mistake and like what I did is I accidentally had two liquid manure tanks in my transform because I was in the process of editing and I was replacing the old one. And so I had it something like this. And if you look at what is going to happen now, the game will think that your liquid manure tank is actually the straw plane, right? Because it is in that index and it's going to think the dirt area is your straw plane. So it'll actually move the liquid manure tank up and down. It'll move this whole thing up and down because it thinks that this is your straw plane. And if you look over here, well, it's not an actual object. So that may or may not give you an error. But the point of what I'm trying to get at is it might give you a static object error where it's saying that the game's trying to move a static object and it's not a kinematic object. This is most likely your problem where you just got something out of order or you had too many of something and the game doesn't understand what the heck is going on over here. So anytime you delete something or add something, always double check your indexes, make sure they are all correct. that should just about do it for covering the basics of animal triggers and tip triggers and repositioning the animals and making sure that all those things line up and perform how you want them to. If you have any questions, let us know. I'll do a tutorial on the navigation mesh and also importing and exporting because I don't think the wiki has either of those. But stay tuned. Check out the FSUK wiki. I'll post a link at the bottom of this video. It's a great resource, and FSUK is the best community for Farming Simulator. So be sure to ask all your questions over there on Farming Simulator. Just be sure to look if it's a modding question. Be sure to post it in the modding help subforum. It helps people who are trying to help others find you and find your question and answer your question. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.